everybody who is joining for this education presentation to learn more about Seattle Public Schools capital levies, Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, which is on our February 8th ballot coming up. We have three amazing guests here tonight to present and give us a better understanding of these levies, as well as answer our questions. After the presentation, we will have an opportunity for Q&A. And if there's a good moment and one of the guest speakers says this is a great time for questions, then what I'm going to ask is for you to raise your hand and I will call on you. Tonight, we have JoLynn Berge, Seattle Public Schools Assistant Superintendent, joining us. We also have Richard Best, Seattle Public Schools Director of Capital. And we have Melissa Pailthorp, who is she lives in the 37th and is chairing the Schools First campaign. Before I turn it over to JoLynn, I just want to take a minute to mention some housekeeping rules. We want everyone's full attention on our guest speakers, and we're going to ask for you to please keep your mute button on to eliminate distractions. We ask for everyone to demonstrate respect and consideration for all. We ask to communicate openly and thoughtfully with others, listen well, and be considerate of the multitude of views that may differ from your own. And this especially applies to our Zoom chat. And we'll be monitoring that just to make sure that we are using it as the positive collaborative tool that we really want it to be. So thank you. And I'm super excited to introduce JoLynn Berge from Seattle Public Schools. I'll now turn the floor over to her to begin with our main presentation.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, everyone. We're excited to be invited here tonight to share with you some information. So just to clarify roles, school district employees can share information about the levies. We can't advocate a certain way about voting. We can ask you to remember to vote, but our lane is really providing information to you about the levies tonight. Melissa Pailthorp is from Schools First, and she has a different role that she plays, and she'll also be sharing with you tonight. So let me get to my right screen here. Sorry, I had a lot of other stuff up. All right. And everyone can see that on the screen? All right, good. So we're here tonight to talk about the 2022 school levy ballot, and we've been doing this in different forums really since September, just providing information and answering questions. So we'll talk a little bit about school funding, why we still need the levies, what are they for. Then there are two levies that are on the ballot. One is the Educational Programs and Operations Levy, known as the EP&O levy. Sometimes we refer to it as the Operations Levy. And then the second is the BTA 5 capital levy, and BTA is Building Technology, Academic, and Athletics. So these are both renewals. These are levies that are currently passed and collections are happening. And these being on the ballot in February, they renew existing levies. So they're not brand new. So a little bit about funding in Seattle. School districts are funded through state, local, and federal dollars. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a moment. But every 3 years, our district and most districts in Washington state, almost everyone except for maybe one or two, ask voters to consider renewing operations levies, which are local property taxes. That's the only way, that's the only vehicle that school districts have in our state. Local levies, the capital levies, are also the main source, pretty much the only source for technology and for school building construction and improvements. And we'll talk about some specific numbers for you to give you some context. So all the funding generated by these levies stays in our school district. These are separate and different than the city family and education levy. So this was our 21-22 general fund revenue picture. So you can see that the state provides almost 60% of our total revenue, but the next largest source is local tax or local levies. And so it's a significant component of our revenue. So property taxes have to be approved by the voters. There are 2 levies up for renewal in February, on February 8th. One is the operations levy. It does fund operations not funded by the state, and one supports technology and school building improvements. So let me just say that when you may have heard that McCleary was fully funded, what happened during McCleary is the state improved how much of an allocation they were providing for teacher salaries. But there are still a lot of different things that they have not improved for 30 or 40 years. The other thing is that they did cap our levies. So the operating levy is capped, the capital levies are not. The operating levy, we are allowed to ask for up to $3,000 per student, but that's it. That's all we can actually ask for. And then we work within what that provides. This really does, renewing the levies does continue critical funding for our students, schools, and staff, and we'll give you some really concrete examples. So a little bit about how our taxes compare to other districts in King County. So this is a picture of what you saw on your October 21 tax statement. We have 3 levies that were currently approved in October: the expiring operations levy, the expiring BTA levy, and then the ongoing BEX levy. The capital levies, again, alternate on the ballot. The capital levies are every 6 years each. They overlap. The operations levy happens every 3 years on a regular cycle. So all told, all together, all of those things, operations, BTA, and BEX, had a rate of $1.84 per thousand, which is how taxes are expressed in the state of Washington and most other places. You can see for other districts around us in King County what their approved voter taxes were on their October tax bills. So you can see all the way up Federal Way with an approved tax rate of $3.63, Highline, which represents Burien, $4.50. So we do have a low rate per thousand, relatively speaking, because we have high value property in our business core downtown. So a little bit more now specifically about the EP&O, or the operations levy. Again, this levy is on the ballot every 3 years. And it really does bridge the gap between what the state provides and what the district needs. So some examples here, and then we'll go into specifics. Child nutrition. So our school lunch program, we generate somewhere between a $2 and $4 million deficit each year. We do pay for additional staff, STEM and career and technical education programs for students receive some funding. And then all of student athletics are completely paid for out of the levy. And the music and some other extracurricular activities also come out of the levy. But the main components are really basic education driven, with it being staffing and special ed and our English learner programs are the majority of what the operating levy is paying for. So the funding gap, one example. The state, we have 50,000 students this year in Seattle. The state funds 9 nurses for our 106 school buildings, and we are hiring 68 nurses. So this is part of what the levy, operations levy, is backfilling, is there's no way a district our size can get by with 9 nurses. And this is very typical. So you could prorate this to any district. Maybe a district half our size would get 4.5 nurses, but they'd have the same and similar gap. And each district has to decide how they're going to use levy dollars to supplement the staffing that they actually need to provide critical services to their students. Another example, custodians. We have over 3,200 classrooms. The state funding is providing 219 funded positions. We employ 408 custodians. Special education. We have a budget of $180 million in this program. The state's funding $82 million. The feds fund about $14 million. This comes from the levy. It is the largest source the largest use of our operating levy. So a quick financial summary. The levy is based on student enrollment and legislative formulas. So again, we ask voters to approve up to the $3,000 that we may ask for legally. And so given that amount, our levy over the 3 years in the operating levy would raise $646.8 million. That is a rate of 74 cents per thousand. Of that 74 cents, we always ask the voters to give us a little bit of capacity, because what you want is the ability, if your enrollment grows, to go ahead and collect for those additional students who come through your doors and who also need the $3,000 per student. So we ask the voters for a little bit of capacity that we actually do bring in if in fact our enrollment grows. But right now, based on our current enrollment and the current legislative formulas, of the 74 cents that is on the ballot for voter approval, we could actually collect 63 cents. And that additional capacity of 11 cents would be for enrollment growth. And this is very normal for school districts to ask for this additional capacity. So the operating levy is really flat from the prior 2019. In 2019, we actually asked for additional capacity. It was brand new. We weren't really sure what the legislature was going to do with levy formulas, but that has kind of settled out. We know that we're at the $3,000 amount now. So we lowered the capacity that we were asking for. That's one of the questions we've been getting. What was on the ballot that passed last time in 2019 was a rate of, I think, $1.05. And this time we're asking again for 74 cents, of which we would be collecting 63 cents based on current enrollment. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Richard to talk about the capital levy.
Thank you, JoLynn. So my name again is Richard Best. I'm Director of Capital Projects and Planning for Seattle Public Schools. I have worked in this position since May of 2014 and worked on the BTA 4, BEX 5, and BTA 5 capital levies. To differentiate the BEX levies from the BTA levies, the BEX levies really do deal with school replacement, school modernization, while our BTA levies, whoops, I lost the PowerPoint, JoLynn. Our BTA levies really deal with building systems. And when I say building systems, I mean things like boiler replacements, roof replacements, electrical service upgrades, HVAC equipment replacements. And then the T portion is for technology. And then the A portion is really a double meaning, both for academics and athletics. And I'll note, JoLynn mentioned this earlier, but capital projects and planning is fully funded by the BTA levy. All of our dollars that we spend are received from our levies. We get very minimal assistance from the state of Washington. Technology, our Department of Technology Services, they get about 85% of their funding through the BTA or BEX levies. So just to create some awareness about our funding sources. Next slide. The way we develop a list of projects for our BTA levies is we actually work with a third-party independent consultant who does literally an investigation of all the building systems at Seattle Public Schools, 105 schools. We have, and of those 105 schools, I'm going to say almost 40 are landmarked, meaning that they're older than 50 years in age. That consultant then puts a report together, and he prioritizes the systems replacements as at end of useful life, nearing end of useful life, fair condition, good condition, and then brand new. He describes, gives us a numerical scale and tells us what needs to be really considered priority one projects that are at the end of their useful life. We also work with a third-party independent cost estimating consultant to help identify the costs that are associated with those systems, so that when we put a financial amount in the levy, we know that it will cover that scope of work. Similarly, our Department of Technology Services implements a similar practice for technology needs. We work with our school board to develop guiding principles for what should be included in our levies. Looking at it, our project recommendations through an equity lens. And then we have a public oversight committee that capital projects has to report to. It's an oversight committee called the BEX BTA Oversight Committee. They hold us accountable for all the projects that we committed for completing in a levy, that we indeed do complete those levies. In addition, our Department of Technology Services has a similar oversight committee. It is called the ITAC Committee, Information Technology Advisory Committee. They too oversee the work that Department of Technology Services commits to implementing in the levy. And then finally, we put a list together and we make a recommendation to our school board of the projects that should be included in the BTA levy. So next slide. So the big project that will be included in the BTA levy is the replacement of Memorial Stadium. We're looking at replacing the grandstands, the synthetic turf, and the lighting at this stadium. The memorial wall will not be demolished. It will be actually repaired and the condition hopefully restored more to its original like condition. We do have money set aside as an allowance to address the enhancement of that memorial wall so that it is modernized. In addition to the grandstands replacements, we will again be replacing the synthetic turf and the field lights. Next slide, JoLynn. Our schools also have playgrounds. Our playgrounds are now on a 15-year replacement schedule, so we have those included in the levy. And then we'll also be making some site repairs to our stormwater systems and our conveyance systems so that we can make sure that stormwater leaves our site and does not create issues around the building perimeters. Next slide. Also included is building systems envelope repairs. We've got windows and door replacements included in the levy and window. And I'll note that again, our landmark buildings, that is not a simple process to repair the windows or replace the windows or replace the doors. As part of our BTA 4 levy, we had window and door replacement at Franklin High School. That project is recently completed. We also had some below grade waterproofing improvements that needed to be implemented at Garfield High School. And then also the refurbishment of the doors. You can see pictures of the refurbished doors at Garfield High School in the top picture there. Roof replacement, we've talked about, and then masonry. Lots of folks think that if you have a masonry building, it requires no repairs. You actually have to put a water repellent coating on masonry, much like you paint your house every 10 to 15 years. And so we have our schools on a 15-year schedule to be have a water repellent and a graffiti coating put on, or if it's not masonry, but it's actually a wood siding or a cement hardy board siding, to be painted every 15 years. So next slide. Included in the BTA levy is also safety and security improvements. We do have seismic improvements that we've identified at several schools. Seismic codes are constantly changing. The 2018 building code had some enhancements to the seismic codes. We look at what schools, we work with a structural engineering firm to identify what schools are potentially at risk in a seismic event, and we implement the improvements that they identify as part of the levy. The funding comes from the levy in order to implement those improvements. We have fire alarm systems, fire sprinkler systems, and then security. We really take a a four-prong approach. I mean, security has, we like to create secure entry vestibules to our schools so that when you enter into a school, you're actually forced into the office pretty much seamlessly. We have security cameras, window and door intrusion alarms, and then an AI phone so that you can actually be at the front door, call into the office, and they can buzz you in. So next slide. During the COVID pandemic, one of the things that's been highlighted is the importance of building ventilation systems. And our building ventilation systems are in good condition. We do have some systems that we did augment with HEPA filtration. And then I will note that the CDC has recommended that MERV 13 filters be in our air handling units. And so we are upgrading air handling units to include MERV 13 filtration, replacing some, upgrading others. And then those areas where we have provided the HEPA filters, we're also looking at upgrading the mechanical equipment that serves those areas as well. We also have plumbing, electrical, lighting improvements planned, and then intercom systems as well. Next slide, JoLynn. Other projects, this is a picture of a secure entry vestibule at EC Hughes where you're actually forced into the office before you can enter into the building. We have an ADA survey that we'll be implementing at approximately 75 schools. ADA was passed in 1991. It stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act. It provides some code regulations that we need to follow so that our buildings are accessible to all. We are not going to be looking at the projects that were completed in BEX 3, BEX 4, BEX 5, but we're going to be surveying all the other schools in the district to make sure that we are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Or if we're not in compliance, we have put an allowance in the levy to begin implementing those projects, and would also continue that effort in our BEX 6 capital levy. We also have restroom improvements, clean energy improvements, and then here at the John Stanford Center, we serve 65 of our elementary schools and 12 additional K-8 schools from the kitchen located at this building. We're going to be making some upgrades to that central kitchen. JoLynn, do you want to take the technology portion, or would you like?
Nope, I can do it. Thanks, Richard. So our director of technology was not able to join us tonight. I'm going to step in for him. To give you some perspective, capital levies do fund 85% of our IT department. There's about 130 staff that work in our IT department. The state provides funding for 3 FTEs. So it's pretty common. While we roll our technology into our capital levy and have named it as such for many years now, you may see other districts, they have standalone technology levies where they ask voters for something that's just specifically for technology. So we're a little bit different there where we roll ours with our capital levy. We do have guiding principles. We are very equity focused on how improvements and dollars are spent. How are we getting those to our students for some educational justice? There are 3 main areas of work. So student learning and support is really about student devices. And then all of our licenses, we buy 60 or 70,000 licenses for both staff and students. We're running about 90,000 devices across our district today. The district systems and data, again, all of our payroll, our accounting system, all the backbone systems, the student information system, which you may know as PowerSchool. If you're an elementary parent, you may be familiar with Seesaw. So there's different both student data systems, student learning management systems, and then the district backbone systems to run our enterprise. And then our infrastructure and security, this is really about our network and cybersecurity components. So all taken together, that's really what the BTA and the BEX levies fund. We have had a significant increase in our tech costs due to going to one-to-one, which meant Before the pandemic, we had started implementing one-to-one devices, so one device for one student at some of our high schools. The pandemic accelerated that, and we issued another 40,000 devices the summer that the pandemic first started. So that would be the summer of 2020. That increased what we thought we were going to be spending, and it took us right to a one-to-one, where we had anticipated moving to that over the course of 2 or 3 more years. So we are managing about 91,000 devices currently across the district. Back to you, Richard.
Great. And then the athletics academics portion of the levy focuses on field replacement, field light upgrades, and then also athletic equipment, arts equipment, and science equipment. We have all of our equipment now on replacement schedules. I'll note that the field lighting is really projects that were part of the high school bell time programmatic environmental impact statement. Seattle Public Schools made a commitment to provide field lights at our secondary schools in recognition that moving the bell time 1 hour later in the day at our high schools would impact community use of our fields. And so we have completed placement of athletic field lights at all of our high schools. We are still in the process of installing athletic field lights at our middle schools. And so that's, this levy will actually complete that endeavor. Next slide. So the Proposition 2, the staff recommendation was for $783 million over 6 years. Again, it addresses the priority 1 projects that were identified by a third-party consultant. It has an assessed or it has a rate of 47 cents per $1,000 of appraised home value, which is an increase of 4 cents over what was collected in the BTA4 capital levy in 2016. And again, as JoLynn noted, the COVID pandemic really accelerated our implementation of one-to-one computer devices for our students. And so, and literally has doubled the amount that was included in prior levies. And so we believe the 4 cents is a good value for the public. So open it up.
We're going to go to questions and answers, but just to give you more information, we do have a page on our website that you can go for additional information. And it does have a list by school of all the projects.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and take a moment just to hit a couple questions that have come in previously, and then I will go to James. You will be next. One of the questions that came in is, like Sky Valley, does Seattle schools have any safety issues with PCBs, etc.?
No, we do not have any issues with PCBs. That is a chemical product that we did analysis on long ago. It was primarily in lighting ballasts. Those lighting ballasts have all been removed. So we have no PCBs in our schools.
Next question. Regarding athletic equipment, does the levy pay for such things as football gear, helmets, protective sports equipment?
No, it's not paying for uniforms. It's not paying for helmets. What it's paying for is things like football sleds, something that you'd replace once every 20, 25 years. Soccer goals, it will replace. Basketball hoops in gymnasiums and gymnasium curtains, that separate so you can have 2 games of basketball. That's the type of athletic equipment we're talking about. We're not talking about student uniforms. We're not talking about helmets, baseball bats, or anything of that. We're talking about large purchases that our co-curricular and physical education departments can't make on an annual basis.
Can I just add one more piece to that, Carrie? So Richard Witt is addressing what's paid for out of the capital levy. The operating levy does pay for some of those things. So the operating levy does pay for uniforms and the type of equipment that's not considered capital. It really has to be like a $5,000 item or bigger to qualify for the capital levy. Otherwise, we pay for it out of the operating levy.
Fabulous. Thank you. James Fackler, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. So I've got a whole bunch of questions, and I think I emailed some over to you, Carrie, because I thought we were going to be asking these questions or presenting them to them. And, you know, some of my questions are probably going to be hard hitting and uncomfortable for people. And so first up, I just want to say that I appreciate all the hard work that you, Carrie, are doing, that the folks running 37th Dems are doing, and to the good work that the folks at Seattle Public Schools are doing. Seattle has a long history of outcomes that are unequitable for communities of color, and then even in a stark divide of the Ship Canal, right? We also have we have inequitable distribution of funding, and we have schools that are in stark contrast to each other. You know, from schools in the South End to schools in Madison Park, and the amounts of money that PTAs are able to raise. And so I heard you guys talk about some equity, and it's great to talk about equity, but I'm wondering, how are we living equity, and what plans do we have to change the funding schemes that we currently have for PTAs? Is there a plan in this levy? Is there a commitment from the school board to change the funding schemes and have actual equitable distribution of PTA funds to all schools so that we can achieve equitable outcomes for all children, including low-income families in the South End?
Thank you, James. So I'll start by saying that this levy is not going to necessarily address all of the PTA issues, but there's some other things in progress that hopefully will. But what we have done is certain components to things that we know are primary examples of where a PTA that can raise a lot of money has given money, like for playgrounds. We now include funding in the levy for playgrounds, specifically to your point, for those places who don't have a PTA to raise those dollars. And that was one of the equity issues that we were trying to address. Richard can talk about Rainier Beach and how that was based on our equity tiering and the scoring that was put on for the first time in BEX 5. We included some type of a rating factor that said, who are you serving? Are you serving students for some educational justice? And that actually moved Rainier Beach replacement building up, and it's currently underway. To your other point, there's policy 6114 that talks about PTA funding. We are in our second year of a participatory budgeting process. That those contributors who represent communities of color have come back with a recommendation to the school board, who they're still discussing it. But I can tell you that the recommendation was to put some type of a distribution model on PTA funding, where a PTA would raise, $12,000, and maybe $3,000 of the dollars would go into a district pot, where the community would have a board that redistributed that to other high need schools. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do to address those equity concerns, which are real, and you're spot on.
So James, I'll just add also from a capital projects levy standpoint, and both the BEX 4 and the BTA 4 capital levies were really addressing expanded student enrollment over a very short period. Literally, we added about 10,000 students between 2008 and 2014, and we were playing catch up. We were trying to build permanent housing in schools for those students in lieu of adding portables. The focus of the BEX 4 levy was literally to try to reduce the number of portables at Seattle Public Schools. Since I've been here, and I've only been here 8 years, I have added over 100 portables. We have gone from 187 portables to 289 portables. With our BEX 5 levy and our BTA 5 capital levy, our board implemented a levy into the equation in which projects were selected, an equity analysis. And so, as JoLynn noted, that helped determine the projects that were included in the BEX 5 capital levy. And I'm just going to name several of them really quickly that are in your legislative district. Van Asselt interim site. It's an interim site for our schools in the South End, similar to what we have in the North End at John Marshall, similar to what we have in West Seattle at Schmitz Park Elementary School right now, where we have a permanent location in which we're going to house students when their schools are being renovated. Then we have Mercer Middle School as part of the BEX 5 capital levy. It's going to begin construction in 2023. It is currently under design. We have Rainier Beach High School, as JoLynn indicated. That is going to begin construction this summer, 2022. It will be complete in the summer of 2025. It's a two-phase project. The school asked to remain on site when we were building the new school, and so we honored that. It's a two-phase project that's extended the schedule for 1 year, but it'll be complete by 2025. Then we have Aki Kurosi Middle School that we are going to begin design this year of a modernization of that school that will begin construction in 2025. So lots of work that will be occurring in our schools in the South End to address some of those equity issues that you highlighted. And our school board is very aware of those concerns from the broader community.
And Richard, I just add Kimball's vacant right now because it's being replaced.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the next question. Diane Ramsey. I think you are still on mute.
I am, excuse me. Okay, so I'm not sure whether this is a question for JoLynn or not, but in September of 2020, Moss Adams issued an internal audit review. They issued their final report. One of the recommendations was that the Audit and Finance Committee include at least 2 members of the public. And then just now, the BEX BTA Oversight Committee was identified and ITAC Oversight Committee. So I have 2 questions. Do the BEX BTA Oversight Committee and the ITAC Oversight Committee, do they have any members of the public on those committees? Or are those committees, the meetings available for the public? And then what is the status of the Moss Adams? They made 14 observations and recommendations. One was that 2 members of the public be on an oversight committee for the Audit and Finance Group. What is the status of the transparency for these 3 committees?
So the BEX BTA and the ITAC committee are primarily community members and students. So there's students on ITAC as well. And then we do have 1 of 2 outside participants, so stakeholders on the Audit and Finance Committee. We had limited response. We started during the pandemic. And so it's on pause until we're hoping to go back out and get a second person nominated. But we do have 1 that's been serving for several months now. And so that has been addressed.
And so are these meetings available for the public to view? Are they Zoom meetings, and when do they happen, or how can we find them?
Yeah, so they are Teams meetings. We use Microsoft Teams as the way to deliver those online meetings, and they're all public. They're published on our various websites. All the Audit and Finance Committees are on the board page, and then I believe the BEX and BTA meetings are on the Capitol page, and the ITAC meetings are on the IT page. And that would give you reference to those committees and their meeting schedules and their meeting minutes.
And I can note, Diane, that the BEX BTA Oversight Committee meets the second Friday of every month from 8:30 to 10:30. And as JoLynn indicated, it is on our website, the Capital Projects and Planning website. And you can put in search BEX BTA Oversight Committee in the district search engine, and it will go to that. There are 11 members of the public that serve on that committee and 2 school board members that serve on that committee. And it has been an absolutely fantastic group of individuals to work with. They are truly subject matter experts as relates to design and construction. and they hold us accountable. And they also hold us accountable, not only financially, but making sure we're looking at our energy usage, our carbon footprint of our buildings. And then we're making sure that we're communicating with our regulatory agencies to make sure that we're addressing their code concerns. So,
And where might I find the response to the Moss Adams audit? Because once they do an audit, they make observations, they make recommendations, and then somebody from the school district needs to respond to each one of those findings. Where might I find that?
I believe it would be on our internal auditors page. The internal auditor that we have generally leads and coordinates the audit response. So that's one thing I'm going to have to check on and get back to you about.
Okay, thank you.
And JoLynn, if you want to send that to me, I will make sure I get it to Diane.
Will do.
Thank you.
And everyone should have that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to make sure that we'll make sure all our members get it, but Diane, we'll make sure you get that as
Thank
well. Nancy, I see your hand raised.
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you. And thank you to the guest speakers. At the beginning of the presentation, this is very informative. You mentioned that you were only allowed to raise $3,000 per student. Is that a Washington State, something that the state tells you? And it just seems like since we perennially have a funding squeeze, what could we do to raise that?
Yeah, it would take legislative action. So when they did the levy swap with McCleary, the last piece of funding McCleary, which was really teacher salaries, they changed the construct of how and what school districts can collect for local levies. Previously, there hadn't been a limit. They did put a limit on that now. They believe what they fund is basic, and anything past that is enrichment for a district. I would say I don't feel like 9 nurses for my district is basic. I don't feel like 10 is basic. I need 100 for this district. So there's some differences in opinion, but it would take legislative action to change. And we actually have the highest authority in the state. Other districts can collect $2,500. So our legislators did go out and ask for Seattle to be able to raise $3,000 because we'd had a lot of people say that's simply not going to work for us.
Still not enough. Thank you.
Thank you. James, I see your hand raised, but I'm going to go ahead and call on Joanna so that we'll do one question each, and then James, I'll come back to you.
Okay, I'm just, so most of the videos behind the Teams meetings, you can't access unless you're on a certain Teams group within the school district. So I don't think those are really accessible. I can see minutes on some of the meetings, and she asked about 3 different, so I can see the VEX oversight, but she asked about 3 different committees. So I'm still curious about where I would find those, and I'm still advocating that that when you have the public meetings, the videos be accessible, the conversation. That's my
question. Yeah, I remember your question, Joanna.
Yes, and I have been advocating for that for quite a few years in different ways and at different times. So
right now, that decision rests with our school board. I will say.
And I would note, Joanna, I do not believe that the BEX BTA Oversight Committee meetings are recorded. We keep meeting minutes of those, what occurs at that meeting, but you are able to attend that meeting, but I do not believe it's a recorded meeting.
well, and of course, I've had an issue with the work sessions. I know they're recorded and they're behind a wall.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanna. James, and let's see, I think we lost, Mateus, sorry, I misspoke. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, as we saw with the students, I think was it from Franklin that were you know, held a rally at John Stanford requesting additional funding and access to counselors. You know, I think we can all agree that we're in an unprecedented situation where, you know, I mean, I think we've all effectively been traumatized by the COVID quarantines, right? You know, this has been a traumatic experience for everybody, and certainly for students going back to school. You know, people sort of re-entering community after being quarantined at home. You know, are suffering from anxiety and other stuff, right? You know, as well as what we've seen with kids with, you know, from school shootings and focuses on mental health. What is, you know, I see that there's money for money for nurses, I see that there's money for custodians, but I don't see anything in there for counselors and you know, equitable access to counselors, additional counselors, given the current situation. What kind of funding out of this operational levy is going to support counselors at Seattle Public Schools, and then again, you know, equitably? Thank you.
Sure. So we do have a few more counselors paid for out of the levy. I did not highlight everything that the levy pays for. I just gave a few examples, but not every example. We do have counselors at all of our high schools and middle schools, and we have counselors at the majority of our elementary schools. So all of our equity tier 1 elementary schools, and those are schools with the highest number of students for some educational justice, or students of color, students in poverty, those all have counselor. Well, they have social workers in elementary schools. Really, it's about that mental health support, not an academic counselor. So they have those in place. We do still have 29 schools that do not have a counselor allocated to them. We have increased counselors by 20 positions over the last couple of years, but we still need more. That's an accurate statement. And it's something that's in the governor's budget proposal. So there's a bill currently working its way through the legislature. We strongly support that bill. It would pay for another 100 FTEs that our levy is currently paying for in the categories of guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, the state funds us 1.4 school psychologists, and we hire more than 60, and then nurses. So those are some other examples of where the levy is stepping in.
So is that, I'm sorry, I just want to respond to that real quick, or ask kind of more clarifying question about that. Is there money to, and is there ability to, since we've heard from the most impacted folks, which would be, you know, really, you know, our high school students have the most experience with the educational experience in Seattle Public Schools, and are really, if we talk about subject matter experts, high school students are subject matter experts in educational outcomes, right? So if we listen to those children, right, those young adults, and what they're saying is that we need more counselors, what is Seattle Public Schools' commitment to listen to those subject matter experts and meet their needs?
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to tweak the budget? Is that something we need to lobby at the school board to do? You know, I mean, it's one thing to punt it to the legislature, but we have the ability to do that within our own purview and within, you know, it seems to me, with our own budgets, right? Is there a priority to listen to those kids?
There are priorities, but there are limitations, Jim. I'm just going to be straight up with you. There are limitations with how we can go about meeting those ratios. So one of the things that we have to balance is we do have collective bargaining agreements that we have to meet the ratios for, and that does direct dollars to certain places in certain ways. Can we fund more counselors? Yes. Right now, the focus seems to be going in the direction of restorative justice. So that is the area that participatory budgeting and those contributors identified as the area that they would like to work on is restorative justice. So including more positions for restorative justice in our schools, which are not directly mental health counselors, but we understand from our students that those are supports that they value and feel like they need an increase on as well.
Thank you, James. I'm gonna go to the next question. Appreciate that. Mateus, go.
Hi, first of all, thank you for coming in. This has been super informative so far, so really appreciate it. I was just wondering, is there an easy way to get an overview of the spend per student per category in that trend over the years? And then also where we can compare this to what schools that have really great outcomes or districts that have really great outcomes, right? Where do we, so that we can see where do we fall short or where are we maybe spending more? I think that would be really helpful to articulate and set the context around these asks, when I talk to people about why these are important levies to vote for, that would just provide more context. Is there a way to get that information?
Yeah, the state, so before I came to Seattle, I was the CFO for the state Department of Education. And during my time there, we developed a per pupil tool where you can go on their website and you can look up the spend by district and identify the per pupil amount. So that's one thing I'll deliver back to Carrie is the direct link. I don't know how difficult it might be for you to find it on their website, but I'll just give you the link directly to the tool and then you can look up district by district, our district compared to other districts. It'll tell you how many positions of different kinds we fund and all of that stuff as well.
And I will make sure we get that out to all of our members. Thank you.
Is there a way to, now one thing is to look at the inputs, right? And the other question is how do you contrast that with the outputs? What are you getting for that money, right? You can't really assess it just based on the inputs. Is there a good way, and maybe there's none, to actually understand how the inputs relate to the outputs?
Well, there's also a tool where you can look up assessment scores, and assessment scores have pros and cons, right? I just want to say that a lot of our families of color do not believe that assessment tools are equitable, that they're biased. So they come with all of those caveats. But again, I'll provide you the link on OSPI's website. There's a way that you can look up our scores by district and by school, and you can compare it to other districts and other schools.
Thank you.
I would just mention the roadmap project also does that across districts, proximate to one another, and that might be helpful.
So Melissa, I want to first ask, are there any more questions for our guests, both Richard or JoLynn, before I move on to Melissa, who I'm really super excited to hear from? I see James, you have a question?
Yeah, so this is kind of like my third group of questions. I really appreciate you guys. It's just education is near and dear to me. My parents, my mother was an educator, but I struggled in school, right? I struggled in having successful experiences in high school, and one thing for me that and I work in the building trades, and one thing that as a child, as a young adult working in shop class offered meaningful experience to me, stuff that was outside of the traditional educational experience per se, but afforded me skills and gave me great self-confidence. I work in the building trades, and see that there is such a need for skilled workers. We're talking about spending nearly $1 billion on skilled workers in this capital budget, so what are we doing? How are we improving our educational experiences for hands-on learners? How much money is being allocated to shop classes? Are we increasing shop classes? Is there capital funding directed at shop classes? What are we doing? How are we supporting the trades? Thank you.
Yeah, so my partner has said similar things to me and has had similar experiences. So know that I hear that, and those are valuable skills that we need more of. So we have frankly had trouble getting kids interested in traditional shop classes. We do have a skill center as well, and our skill center, they do offer different types of classes, and they continue to evolve what those course offerings are. But the exciting piece is that we recently signed a resolution to have a pre-apprenticeship program And in that pre-apprenticeship program, it directly ties with the building trades and gives our students brand new opportunities. So Richard, I'm going to let you speak to it after that.
Yeah. So I would just say also, James, that the district has entered into a student community workforce agreement with the Seattle Building Trades Council. And the focus of that student community workforce agreement is really working with our construction partners to create awareness around the district's CTE programs, around the skill center programs, and around the pre-apprenticeship programs. And working also with the labor unions to create that awareness as well. We meet monthly with the Building Trades Council and our construction partners. We're now working in our CTE educators as well, and a skill center principal into those conversations as well, so that we have a cohesive approach to present to our student population, trying to create awareness about the building trades as a viable career pathway. There is a recognition at Seattle Public Schools that not every student is on a college pathway, and we want to create awareness around the building trades as a very viable living wage job career pathway for those students who may not be on a pathway to go to college, but also for those students who are on a pathway to go to college, as maybe this is another alternative when you decide you don't want to be an accountant or you don't want to be a lawyer. The building trades, you have some awareness about the opportunities that are being offered there. So we started this program in really November of this year, but I want to say both the construction partners that we're working with, and there are 7 or 8, any project greater than $5 million, we're working with those contractors, and the Building Trades Council have been great to work with so far. And you will be hearing more about this, but more importantly, our students will be hearing much more about our CTE offerings and our skill center offerings.
Just real quick, do you guys have apprenticeship requirements on your projects?
We do.
I know that we do. So what is that? How does that, what are those requirements? I mean, I know that like the stadium, the Kraken Stadium, and there's other projects that get negotiated with funding that have apprenticeship requirements as part of their agreements.
So we have, the state law has a minimum of 15% as an apprenticeship requirement. Our projects are generally greater than that. They're generally around 18%, but this is something that we are tracking on a monthly basis.
Is there a way to increase that in our contracting so we give more opportunities to local youth?
Would have to work with our construction trade partners, because our projects are design bid build for the most part, or GCCM, which is another form of design bid build. But definitely our construction partners are definitely aware of that as a desire both for Seattle Public Schools, and then also, they're recognizing that the importance of having, availability to labor. And really it's the pre-apprenticeship programs that we're focused on to get students into our pre-apprenticeship programs, so that then we can get them into the apprenticeship programs of the local building unions.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would now like to introduce Melissa.
Thanks. And I'll be quick. I know it's been a long meeting, and it's really great to hear all of your questions. I'm here at Melissa Pailthorp. I currently chair the school's first committee. It's a citizen-led committee that rallies every 3 years to get out the vote for the levies. I'm a lifelong resident of the 37th. I went to school at a time when maybe some of you remember the old Maple Elementary on the south end of Beacon Hill, and actually the top floor was condemned, so we couldn't use it. We used portables in the first floor. And I'm glad Seattle's come a long way since then. So I've attended school in many of the buildings in Seattle and seen firsthand, what happens when we do and don't have the support to really provide safe, secure environments for our kids. I think, you've probably heard a lot of information, a lot of details about these levies. My takeaway is a whole lot of thought and effort goes into preparing these. It doesn't start the year of the levy. It's a several year process to put these together. I think what's really important to remember is these are replacement levies, and 15% of our operating budget comes in Prop 1. And without that, our kids won't have the supports that we've been talking about tonight. And replacing those isn't an option with other funds. So I think that's just really, really important. While we all wish our state funding formulas did a better job of providing for all kids, they don't, and we need our local levies. I would add to that, we need, again, safe, secure buildings for our kids. We need an earthquake-proof memorial stadium. We are hearing about lots and lots of the projects that are being addressed in the South End. That's really great. Some that are coming up to the next cycle when we do the Building Excellence Levy is likely to feature both more work on Aki and then Washington Middle School as well, which has long needed replacement. So just, encourage you to pay attention. I think, the biggest opposition we have in this levy is just apathy more than anything else. You will see some signs around town encouraging people to vote no. I would argue, and maybe you've realized in listening to this, those are just factually wrong. And it's really important to pay attention and educate your neighbors and really get those ballots in. I'm just going to put into chat some other ways that you can help. So where's chat? There's more information about the campaign itself on schoolsforseattle.org. Please go there and you can download information and sign up to help, which would be really important. I would say representation from the South End on the Schools Force Committee is thin. So we urge people to connect and help us, particularly the next time around. Donations are real helpful of any size, and you can donate online. Sorry, the link didn't carry, but you can also go to our website and there's online donation there. You can sign up there as well to help text banking on February 3rd. If you want yard signs, I've got them in my driveway, 4403 51st Avenue South. There's a pickup truck there with signs and stakes. Take them. My encouragement would be to keep them for 3 years from now in your own garage. But if you want to bring them back and put them in my pickup truck, I'll keep them for you. And then lastly, on February 7th, Monday evening, before ballots are due on Tuesday, me and some of my closest friends, and hopefully you too, will be waving signs at the Franklin High School overpass, where we often see people promoting getting votes in. So any of those things would be welcome, and just encourage you to participate, educate your friends, particularly those who don't have kids, and make sure people get their ballots.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. There was one question that popped in, and it was, if the levy doesn't pass, when can it be resubmitted and passed at the earliest?
I think JoLynn would, or Richard might have a better sense of that. It's a pretty narrow window though.
Yeah, a new resolution would have to be passed by the board by February 25th for April ballot.
Okay, perfect. And we have one question raised. I see Alex Stevens.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for coming. I just want to get something clear because you're with the campaign.
Yes.
And so I just like to know, did the campaign approach us to come to present on this prior? And maybe
we
you
did.
know.
Yeah, we actually reached out in November. And I think you guys were having a change in leadership maybe, and it sounds like things got lost in the cracks. So we did reach out. So I'm not sure what happened there.
Thank you.
I would like us all to give a warm thank you to all of our guests. I am honored, Melissa, JoLynn, and I'm so sorry. I'm just like Richard. I'm just like, oh, where are you? I just want to thank you. We are so appreciative. This has been incredibly educational, incredibly motivating, and we are just grateful. So thank you very much.
Carrie, may I just one other thing?
Absolutely.
Hi, Richard. Good. Hi, Richard. Good to see you in this forum.
Thank you, Alex. I saw you there too, and appreciate all the work you're doing. So, yeah.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Get those ballots in.
Absolutely. Everybody
Let
get
us know
your
if you have
ballots
any
in.
questions.
Thank you, everyone.
You don't even need a stamp.
Perfect. Thank you all very much.